It's not often that major news outlets report on something from the birding world. Of course, there are exceptions. Sometimes a species that was previously thought extinct is rediscovered. Sometimes a really rare bird shows up, causing a lot of excitement and a confusing boost to local tourism. Sometimes someone breaks a birding record and the media catch up. And of course, there's that one woodpecker that is kept alive so that the media can keep reporting on Bigfoot-like sightings. This week, however, birding is back in the spotlight, and it's back with a splash. The American Ornithological Society announced their plans to change all bird names derived from people. And in today's video, I wanted to give you an overview of what this is all about, the background, and some initial reactions to it. So let's begin with the obvious question. What is this all about? The subjects in question are birds like these: Scott's oriole, Townsend's warbler, Audubon's shearwater. An astonishing 152 bird species that regularly occur in North America alone are named after people. And with a history of colonialization, wars against indigenous people, and slavery, it's not entirely surprising that some of these names carry a lot of baggage. Take Scott's oriole, named after Winfield Scott, a Civil War general involved in the ethnic cleansing and forced relocation of Native Americans in what became known as the Trail of Tears. Townsend's warbler is named after John Kirk Townsend, a naturalist and ornithologist of the early 1800s. In addition to birds, Townsend collected skulls, stolen from the graves of Native Americans, in order to aid his friend Samuel Morton's work, who set out to measure them, in order to prove white superiority. The great John James Audubon was a slave owner, who once returned the hospitality of a family of former slaves who had managed to escape, by returning them to their original enslaver. It's stories like this that the movement is coming from. And in a field that's been working hard on its image as being dominated by old white men and is looking to attract people from more diverse backgrounds, it's easy to see that these names don't exactly scream inclusivity. After all, most birds named for people are named after men of European descendants. And of the few birds named after women, like Anna's hummingbird or Lucy's warbler, all but one of them use their less differential first names. I should also note that the call to remove people's names from species names is neither exclusive to the world of birds, nor is it a new one. In medicine, eponyms are being replaced, and it's understood that descriptive names are much better going forward. And in the bird world, two well-known name changes are being discussed quite a bit these days. The first is the long-tailed duck, formerly known as an old squaw, a derogatory term for indigenous women. It was renamed in 1999. The other is the thick-billed longspur, formerly named McCown's longspur after a Confederate general who fought to defend slavery and went to war against native tribes. But changes change, and you know the times we live in, and you can probably already guess the reactions of some people. We'll get to that later. As a final note, before we dive into the changes, I would like to introduce you to Charles Wilson Peer, a man of many occupations in the late 18th century. Here's a quote from him. "There's also another unmeaning custom, which is still more essential for us to get rid of. I mean that of naming subjects of nature after persons, who have plumed themselves with those childish ideas of being the first discoverers of such or such things. That's 200 years ago. I think it can be expected from humanity to learn a thing or two in the meantime." So bird names for birds appeared on the scene, and they petitioned the ASO to change the names. And it took time. It took meetings, it took committees, it took bi-weekly conference calls, but 2 days ago they published their recommendation. And let me tell you, it's a banger. Number 1. Change all English names of birds that have been named after people, and 3 additional names. So yes, that's the big one. Renaming all English names of birds associated with people, not just a select few. The committee says they don't want to become a morality police, deciding which ornithologists are deemed worthy to keep their names attached to birds. And I think it's fair enough and very much in line of their previous reluctance to rename individual species. The 3 additional species are, by the way, the Inca dove, which is terribly misnamed after a French ornithologist confused Inca and Aztec cultures, flesh-footed shearwater, which has pinkish legs, which the committee felt implied a default skin color, and Eskimo curlew, for obvious reasons, which shouldn't bother birders too much, as the bird hasn't been seen in over 30 years. Number 2. Establish a separate bird names committee. Now that one just makes sense. They're looking to involve people from the broader public, not just scientists giving sciencey names. Which is good, we're not looking for a new taxonomy here, we're looking for a common name. And number 3, involve the public in the selection of new names. Now, that sounds good on paper, but I do hope they manage it carefully. We all know what happens if you ask the internet for help in naming things. It rarely goes according to plan. Of course, all of this will take several years, and the ASO have already announced that they will take a tiered approach, starting with pilots and so on and so forth. But what are people thinking about it? What's the initial reaction? Let's have a look. It depends on whom you ask, of course, but broadly speaking, I feel I see maybe 4 groups. The first one is people who love it. These are either the people that thought it would be stupid to name a bird after a person in the first place, or are unhappy with specific people like the ones mentioned before being remembered as the great discoverers of bird species. The second group is people who are a bit on the fence about it. I see a lot of comments saying that some ornithological history is going to be lost, that some of the names don't offend anyone, that now they have to buy new field guides and so on and so forth. In my opinion, it's people generally not super comfortable with change. I guess you could call them a bit traditional, not in a bad sense of the word, but they generally have the capacity to understand where the other side is coming from. And most would agree that certain people should probably not be honored anymore today. The third group of people are people who are involved with birds, who are active in the community, but are very traditionalistic and say, you know, we're just going to keep calling them what we've always called them, we're not going to buy new field guides and so on and so forth. This seems to be a rather small group in the community. Of course, lots of people move between these groups. One good example is Ken Kaufman, an absolute legend in North American birding, author of many books and field guides. He says he was initially completely against the initiative and met with the guys to talk some sense into them. But after listening to their arguments, after hearing their side of the story, after doing some more research, he says he's come around and he's now one of the biggest proponents of the initiative. Sadly, that does not apply to group number 4. And I implore you, do not do what I did. I went into Twitter, I checked the account of the ASO and read through all the replies, and they might actually make you dumber. So I handpicked a few tweets to share some of the agony, but spare you the horror of Twitter. I had a big rant about those people written down, but I deleted it for the sake of my own mental health. Anyways, have a look, and keep in mind, these are people upset about this who wouldn't know what a Wilson's Warbler is if Audubon shot one and placed it in their hands. It's, yeah. So what do I think? I'm honestly surprised that the ASO came out with such a courageous step forward. As you can tell, I'm a big proponent of the initiative, and I think it's fantastic. You could probably tell. I'm relatively new to New World birding, and before I came here, I was always telling, to my family, to my friends, English bird names are so much better than the German bird names. They're so much more descriptive. But then I got here, and there's Wilson's Warbler, there's Wilson's Plover, there's Cooper's Hawk, there's Harris's Hawk, there's Blackburnian Warblers, there's Baird Sandpipers, and all of this was just confusing to me, and it's not helpful. But of course, to me, the helpfulness comes second to the topic of inclusivity. I truly believe birds belong to everybody, and naming them after people with questionable pasts, of known slavers, of people who commit genocide against Native Americans is just shameful to me. And let's not act as if the people who have these beautiful birds named after them were the first to ever set eyes on them. Indigenous names were around long before the first people came to the New World and shot birds to paint them. Buick never saw Buick's wren. Anna never saw Anna's hummingbird. And are we losing history? No, we're adding to history, as any civilized society should. My wish for the future names is, let's be bold, let's be creative, let's use indigenous names wherever we can. I mean, look at the Jabiru, look at the Agami heron, look at the resplendent quetzal. And now, tell me again that McGillivray's Warbler is a name that we should keep. Let's celebrate the birds, so that we can protect them, together. Thanks for watching this. This was a little bit different kind of content than usual. Hope you enjoyed it. I do feel very strongly about the topic, as you could tell, and I wanted to share my thoughts. Please leave yours in the comment. Really curious to hear how you feel about this. Of course, it's a very important topic, and the discourse is very important, I think. And also let me know if you'd like to see more of this content in the future. We will not be sacrificing the birding trip videos. Next one is coming out on Friday, and I hope to see you then. Have a great week. Ciao.